Welcome back to the Abundant Culture Podcast, where business owners like you come to learn how to grow the valuation of their companies so they can sell in the future. On this show, you'll learn how to sell for top dollar and invest in profitable businesses around the country. Now, here are your hosts, Jazz and Joe.
Welcome back to Abundant Culture Podcast. This week, Joe and I want to talk to you about accepting the best offer for your business. So if you're in the process of selling your business right now, or if you plan to sell your business in the future, you definitely need to take note of this episode, because if you work with a broker, they may or may not, most likely will not tell you this information. So this week we wanted to talk about the best offer that you could accept, whether it's cash or bank financing. And then when it comes to bank financing, whether it's a traditional or SBA. So Joe's probably going to do most of the talking, because honestly, he's the one that negotiates the deals and he's the one that talks to the sellers.
Yeah, so the first thing that I want to preface is that the ability to sell your business and what that would actually look like for you is dependent upon how you actually build your business. If you build your business to basically grow even without you, then you will be able to sell on really the best terms, whatever terms that you want. However, if your business needs you in order to grow, you're not probably going to get the best terms to sell your business on. And that's not really a huge issue. You just have to understand that you will have to be flexible. There's not going to be, private equity funds and strategic buyers kicking down your door to buy your business if your business is you. We just spoke to sellers recently, and they were super involved in their business, which I'm totally fine with. I'll still buy a business where the owner is super involved. However, in their case, they wouldn't be able to sell it the way that they want to because they are super involved. So they're not going to get the best offer out of me or any other buyer for that matter. Unlike another deal where the seller isn't involved in the business at all, or doesn't have to be involved with the business at all, they might overprice their business and still get, the price that they want, even though it might be above market.
And the reason for that is because if you think about it from a buyer's perspective, even if the buyer wants to go in and they want to be an owner operator and they want to work every day and just take like a salary, then they can go in and do that. Maybe, unfortunately, they'd have to maybe fire the manager or whatever, transition they need to make. However, if a seller, if you don't have the manager in place and you're working there every day, then it's going to be harder to replace you. And then we as buyers have to take that into consideration. So we have to do a little bit more work to hire the right person, train them the right way. So yeah, I mean, it's better to subtract than add in that case.
Yeah, and it's by far the biggest risk in an acquisition, period. If you don't have that risk, there's other risk in buying a business, but that's by far the biggest one. When you solve that problem on the behalf of your buyer up front, it's going to be a much easier conversation, and the conversation is going to more likely steer your way as opposed to the buyer's way. So I just wanted to preface that. So when somebody wants to sell their business, there's a couple main concerns that they have. One, it's not being able to sell their business at all. Two, not being able to get enough money from the transaction based on price or terms or whatever the case may be. And there's other concerns too, but I would say that those are the top two. And the reason those are the top two is because 90% of small businesses that are listed for sale never actually sell. And out of the 10% of the businesses that do sell, from our experience and our much more experienced partners' experience, only about 7% of those companies actually get financed through the bank. That basically effectively means that the bank only finances 0.7% of all potential business acquisitions. Most sellers don't know that. Brokers may neglect to tell the sellers that. And that's really a disservice to the previous owner. And here's the reason why. Whenever you're getting ready to buy a business, there's going to be, from a financial standpoint, there's only going to be two types of buyers. There's either going to be an all cash buyer, or there's going to be a buyer that's going to use financing. So let's talk about the all cash buyer first. The all cash buyer, the main problem with selling to an all cash buyer is that they're really, really hard to find because they're wealthy people. It's not like, there's just wealthy people on, every single little street corner in your neighborhood. Well, depending on your neighborhood, it might be. But you just can't throw a rock and hit somebody who has a high enough net worth and a high enough liquidity to basically buy your business for all cash, especially if this is a 6, 7, or 8 figure acquisition.
And then on top of that, they also have to, pretty much they're either doing it for a strategic play to add on to their business, like they need something in your business, or they only want to buy one business in their whole entire life and they want to stay there, and that is literally the only purchase that they are going to make and invest in.
Yeah. So that's the thing. They're really hard to find because they have to be a wealthy individual. And another reason they're hard to find is because even the people who can afford to pay all cash for your business don't want to do that. You might be asking why. The reason why is because if they don't use any other type of financing, any type of debt financing, or any type of leverage, they're going to end up increasing their risk, because I would rather, put $100,000 down and lose that than to put $500,000 down and lose that. So it increases the liability and increases their risk, but it also decreases their return. If I use leverage to buy a small business, my return on investment is going to be a lot higher buying that small business than if I didn't use leverage at all. And I'm going to also have the ability to buy more than one company if I'm using leverage. So even the people who are wealthy, a lot of times they're wealthy because they're really smart. And really smart, wealthy people tend to use leverage. They prefer that. Even if they have all the money that they need, they'll still use leverage. Look at every single wealthy company on the face of the planet that you can think of. They all use some type of debt and leverage. And that's just because it's just a smart financial decision. And if they aren't now, they have in the past, or they're planning on to. So that's the issue. That's the main issue with all cash buyers. The other issue with all cash buyers is that, so one, they might not even notice that your business is for sale, because all cash buyers, they have a lot of options. I mean, they're wealthy, they have liquidity, they have great credit. They can buy any business they can possibly think of. So they might not even notice that your business is for sale. And I'm not trying to say that your business isn't amazing, but that doesn't mean that that person will notice that it's amazing. They have tons of options. And even if they do pick your business, literally 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, a cash buyer is going to want a substantial discount on the purchase. So let's say you want to sell your business for $1 million. A lot of times they'll want at least, at bare minimum, a 30 to 40% discount. So that means you wanted to sell your business for $1 million, but the cash buyer is only going to want to buy it for at most $700,000. Now, that's not only a $300,000 discount, but what does that do for your livelihood and your income afterwards? Let's say you are able to get a 10% return on investment consistently, and you want to retire off of a 6-figure income. So you want to make $100,000 a year. Well, if you sold your business for $1 million and you make a 10% return, you'll make $100,000 for the rest of your life. If you aren't a math person, don't worry about it. You can go home and try it out on a calculator or whatever the case may be, but I'm just giving an example. But if you accept that discounted offer, you're now at $700,000. A 10% return on that is $70,000 a year. That is not only a $300,000 discount, that is also $30,000 per year in income that you no longer have, that can't go towards the lifestyle that you want, the lifestyle that you've worked for. So are cash buyers awesome? Sure, depending on how, your personal situation. But just know that there's pros and cons to everything, and there's definitely cons to cash buyers. The pros being that they can close faster and with more certainty. But if you don't go the cash buyer route, which is really hard, like I said, then your only choice is to sell to somebody who's going to use bank financing. Now, well, no, I was going to say that today, but or unless you knew something that I didn't know, we'll see. But it's to use bank financing, and there's two types of bank financing traditionally. There's commercial financing, and that's not available for most small business owners because a lot of times in order to get a commercial loan, your business needs to be doing, they say at a minimum, $1 million in EBITDA. However, I have not yet seen a commercial bank that is willing to finance a business that's doing $1 million in EBITDA. The lowest I actually seen was 1.7 million.
That's as of, we'll just round it up to August 2021.
Yeah, so they like to see almost $2 million in EBITDA in order to finance your company. So if you aren't doing that, if your company isn't that big yet, that's totally understandable. Most companies aren't that big. Your company's still awesome. Even if it is not that big, it's totally fine. Just know that commercial financing is not going to be available for that company under most situations. So what's your other option? The other option is the, coveted SBA.
That everybody loves.
Yeah, and the SBA, don't get me wrong, it is a great option, but it's only a great option for a small percentage of transactions. And the reason why is because if somebody is using SBA financing, they need to have a certain amount. Obviously, they need a certain credit profile. They need a certain amount of collateral. Not only does the business need a certain amount of collateral, but the person might need their own collateral as well. They need a certain amount of liquidity, and all three of those things can be easy enough to come by, but the nail in the coffin is usually with the last criteria, which is they have to have some type of applicable industry experience. Now, most people who buy businesses, they're first-time buyers. There's not a bunch of repeat buyers. I'm a repeat buyer. Jasmine's a repeat buyer. We know some other repeat buyers, but for the most part, most people who use SBA loans, the reason they're using a SBA loan is because they're a first-time business buyer and they think that that's the easiest route. And that's because that's what we're sold. That's what I was sold on. One of my first acquisitions I ever tried to buy, I had enough money to do a 50% down payment and they still didn't want to do the transaction. So they're very strict on the whole industry experience thing. And they say that they're lenient if those other criteria are well taken care of. But like I said, I've been doing this for a couple years now. I have a mentor who's been doing it for decades, and it's just not something that we see typically. So if your goal is to sell your business and you don't want to go the cash buyer route and you can't go the commercial financing route and your business may not be able to get SBA financing. Before I move on, another thing you want to keep in mind is that if you're like most business owners and you don't want to pay taxes and you decrease your taxable income on your tax return, like most business owners do, and I totally understand it, and I'm okay with it as a buyer. But when you show that tax return to the bank is going to say, oh, I thought you said you did $400,000 in profit.
Tax return is the end all be all.
Yeah, the $400,000 in profit. I only see two. I don't know what you want me to do with this. Is basically what they're going to say. So that's either going to lead to a reduction in your price, or most likely they're just not going to fund it.
And something else you forgot to mention is that if your business is on a decline for whatever reason,
they're gonna
drop it. They don't care about the reason. They don't care that you just had a kid, that you had health problems, that you had one contract fall through because of COVID. They don't care about any of that, and it's gonna be like a huge red flag for them.
And this is why so many businesses don't get bought, is because it's so hard to find a business that fits all the bank's criteria and fits all of the buyer's criteria. And then you, as a seller, also have to like the buyer. It's just so many moving parts that's hard to line up. So what are your choices if none of those, if none of those routes are available to you? It's the route that literally is probably the easiest route, the most likely to close, in my opinion, and probably the best for everybody involved. But people tend not to like to do it because some brokers will actually steer you from it for reasons that we could talk about a little bit later. But the way I would sell my business, if I didn't want a cash buyer, didn't want couldn't get commercial financing, couldn't get an SBA loan for my business, the route I would do is I would have the buyer bring a substantial amount of cash as a down payment, and then I would owner finance the rest. That is literally the most simple, the most easy way to sell your business.
And the fastest way.
And the fastest way. Now, a lot of business brokers, if they're watching this, will have a problem with that because they'll say, well, that's a risk for the seller because if they seller finance a substantial portion of the business, what if the new owner runs the business into the ground and then the seller can't get paid? So, couple responses to that. The first response is you shouldn't sell your business to somebody who might run your business into the ground in the first place. If you doubt that this person, the management capability or whatever the case may be, if they don't have it and you feel like because they don't have it, your business will suffer for it, do not sell to them because there's plenty of other buyers who can absolutely not only maintain your business, but grow it substantially past where you have it today. So, first of all, just don't sell your business to that type of person. But secondly,
so you need to do your due diligence while they're doing due diligence on the company. You do your due diligence on the buyer. So look them up all over the internet, social media. When we talk to sellers, they're more than feel free to listen to the podcast, listen to our YouTube, get to know us as people, because you need to know that we're capable of doing it. And then not only that, but I wouldn't mind if a seller asked us for a business plan or just a plan of action, a 90-day plan, whatever the case may be, so that they see that we are definitely going to run this business properly. You can trust us and we're going to grow it at that. So I wouldn't mind even if somebody asked us for a business plan for, the succession or whatever, as just another way to trust that the person knows what they're doing and that you're going to get paid, that it creates a win-win situation for everyone.
And secondly, as the seller, it is your responsibility to prepare that business to the point where Warren Buffett says, invest in businesses that a idiot can run because one day maybe an idiot will run it. If you put systems and processes and SOPs in your business, then technically you could sell it to a high schooler. As long as they can read, they'll figure it out. And if your business isn't at the point where you can just pass it off to some random person for at least a month and they can at least maintain it, then that's not just indicative of that person's lack of management skill, but that might be indicative of your lack of preparation for the sale. So you want to make sure that you do your part. The buyer definitely has to do their part, but make sure that you do your part and make sure that your business is a well-oiled machine. And I think that's an aspect that a lot of people skip out on, because I just spoke to somebody who had a pretty successful business, but they didn't even have a written SOP. I get if it hasn't been updated in a while, but it didn't exist.
30-year business, and you just say that the employees know what they're doing.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely nuts. Because what if you wanted to pass it down to your kid? What are you what are you going to get your kid to run the business off of? So that's another thing. Also, there's things that you can put in place to keep track of what the buyer is doing with the business. So if you do owner financing, you are almost taking the place of the bank. And one thing that's really cool is if I get a bank loan on a deal, some banks will require that I send them quarterly reports on the business. I send them quarterly financials so that they know how the business is performing under my management. And I would have to do that sometimes for the life of the loan. And sometimes it's quarterly, sometimes it's just whenever they ask for it. So as an owner, if you did owner financing, you could say, okay, I want to see monthly or quarterly reports from the business so I can make sure that you're taking care of things. And if you're not, if I see a decline, I'm going to call you. And then you have the right to do that. And if they fall below a certain threshold, guess what? You can write an agreement that basically states if it falls below a certain point before you run it into the ground, I have the ability to foreclose on the business, take the business back, and basically from there you can either continue to run it or you can sell it again. In what other situation could you sell the same asset twice if somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do? And not only all of that, so it has all of those benefits to it, but it also solves the income problem. Most people don't know how to invest the lump sum of money that they get from a sale. So a couple things are going to happen. Either they're going to have to substantially decrease their lifestyle, or they're just going to end up running through the money. And, that's most baby boomers. That's their number one fear, is outliving their money.
And not only that, but you're going to have to more than likely pay a bunch of taxes if you get a lump sum of money. And seller financing can, over time, just lessen it for you, lessen that burden.
Yeah. So the thing about owner financing is you can still get a decent lump sum up front because, you deserve.
It's a down payment.
Yeah, there's a down payment. So you're getting some lump sum up front, but the rest of it, you're getting over time, and you can tack on interest to those payments. So over time, you actually make more from the transaction than if you would have just took the lump sum, paid the, capital gains taxes on it.
And then put it in your bank account, which loses money due to inflation, but we can talk about that at a later date.
Yeah. So I'm not saying that everybody has to do a ton of seller financing. The amount is going to vary. The SBA wants you to do at least 10 to 15% seller financing. So even if you did bank financing, you would still have to seller finance some because the bank would want that. So some people can get away with just 10, 15%. If you don't have your ducks in a row, you might have to seller finance 50%. I've heard of people seller financing a lot more than that. It just really depends on your business, the buyer, and your situation. But put yourself in a situation where you have multiple options and then you can pick the best option for you. I think the question that this podcast was supposed to answer is what's the best offer? And here's my opinion. The best offer is the one that's most likely to close.
And the quickest one, in my opinion.
It's the one that's most likely to close with the least amount of hiccups. And the reason I say that is because if a buyer offers you 20% over your asking price and they're using commercial or SBA financing or whatever the case may be, however they're going to plan to give you the money, that doesn't mean anything if they can't execute on that. However, if a buyer comes to me and they say, oh, I can put X amount of dollars down, I just need you to owner finance the rest, and they can prove that they can bring the down payment that I need, that's going to be something that is going to close all day because there's no other third party to the transaction that says otherwise. That's going to say, oh, you can't do that, or you can't do this, or we just don't want to finance it. So go with the offer that's most likely to close, but also put yourself in a position where you have multiple offers and you can accept whichever one you want as opposed to not having any offer.
Yeah. So all in all, just if you had to leave with one takeaway, like we always do our guests, if you have to leave with one takeaway, I would just say to be open-minded about your offer, about which one you want to accept and how the business can be sold.
And one thing I wanted to add, owner financing isn't just for small, little mom and pop companies. There's a company called Quest that was previously owned by, I believe his name is Tom. I know it's
Tom Boyer.
Yeah, I always forget how to pronounce his last name, but Tom Boyer, and he was the founder and owner of Quest. I think Quest was a multi-billion-dollar company, and he had a form of owner financing in that transaction. $1 billion company, owner finance. And I don't think that's, out of the ordinary. Owner financing makes sense for everybody involved because it brings down the risk for the buyer. It also opens up options for the seller, gets them what they want today. It also helps with the income issue in the future. There's no reason not to do at least a little bit in every single transaction, in my opinion. But your broker would probably disagree.
So that is all we have. If you're interested in learning more about the business selling process, then Joe and I created this checklist for you so that you can go through and you can determine, what you still need to do before you sell your business, because there's definitely a lot of prep. So that link is in the show notes. It's also on our website. You'll find it if you search for it. So thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Abundant Culture Podcast with Jazz and Joe. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you subscribe, then leave an honest rating and review. And remember, we're ready to buy your business. So if you're ready to sell or passively invest in other small businesses, go to abundantculture.co for more information. We publish episodes every Friday, so we'll see you next week.